Hey guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to TacticalBassin. Today we're talking winter crankbait fishing. Specifically, we're talking about speed cranking. The conditions that you're looking for, the baits you need. Let's go. Winter crankbait fishing is one of the best ways that I have ever encountered to catch a giant bass. Not just to catch fish, but to catch the true monsters. Tim and I have been refining this technique for more than a decade. Speed cranking in the wintertime, burning baits at a time of year when everything says don't do it. Everything is slow. All the other anglers are dragging on the bottom, and we're taking 7-to-1 reels and 8-to-1 reels and burning. Now, the vast majority of time that we're talking about this, we're talking about deep diving crankbaits. We're talking about the tactical DD that we designed. We're talking about some of your mega bass offerings. But make no mistake, this can be done with shallow baits too. So today we're taking an in-depth look at this style of fishing. We're going to talk about the areas that we like to do it. I'm gonna stand up here in just a minute and actually show you the retrieve speed, because I think that is critical. We talk a lot about going fast, but it's a whole different deal when you see it. And then lastly, we're going to talk through a variety of baits. We've got 3 different styles of bait. And again, we spend a lot of time talking about burning those deep divers, but that's not the only application here. Today we're taking a deeper look at speed cranking. We're going to look at the entire category. So first off, where do you do this? What are the conditions? Speed cranking really seems, first off, you can do it all year. All year. You can burn a crankbait in the summer and smash them. But speed cranking as a way to specifically target a giant bass is definitely a cold water winter thing. In most of the country, it seems to kick off about October. If you're deep in the south, late November, early December is when it's going to start for you. But in most of the country, October is when that bite will kick off, and it's going to run all the way to the spawn, no matter where you are in the country. And then again, you can do it all summer as well, but the part where you're targeting, I got my hands in my pockets because I'm holding on to hand warmers. It's cold out here. The part where you're targeting those bigger bass, you're isolating the really big ones and they're reacting, the colder the water, the better. Let me say that again. The colder the water, the better. We are taking 7-to-1 and 8-to-1 reels and burning crankbaits in water temperatures in the 30s and 40s and 50s. And the bass lose their minds for it. Now, if you had grown up at the same time, maybe you did, that Tim and I did, you know that all traditional crankbaiting, deep diving crankbaits were thrown on 5-to-1 reels, period. A lot of shallow crankbaits were too, but some of them were on 6-to-1. Those were typically the fastest reels around. But 5-to-1 slow fishing is how you would fish a crankbait. You would just wind those things along. And the guys that were really good at bass fishing, they knew to pause once in a while, let it float up. That was it. That was crankbait fishing. Very few people knew to do any more than that. And frankly, we didn't. It took a lot of experimenting, seeing things going on around the country, seeing things going on locally, and then doing a ton of our own experimenting to realize that you could trigger a feed response in a bass by speeding up, even in cold water. When Tim and I figured this out, try to wrap your mind around this. We would be out in 15 to 20 feet of water, and these giant bass, we're talking 6 to 12 pound bass as we were learning this method, chasing baits all the way up to the boat. Some of these fish coming all the way within eyesight at the boat, and we would go into figure eights and catch them. They would eat. We're talking water 38 degrees, 39 degrees, 40, 41. And these fish are going into a figure eight at the boat like a muskie and then committing. We had never seen anything like it. We knew we had something so magical, so special, and no one had a clue that we were doing it. Tim and I did it for years. We kept it quiet. We caught so many giant fish when people thought we were doing other things. It was incredible. Now, it took a long time from there to refine the baits, to find the best baits for different situations, the best conditions to be doing it. When do we do it? When do we not do it? That all took a lot of time. So let's jump into it. First off, when and where are you speed cranking? We've already covered the when, the second that water gets cold. I don't care if it's bluebird skies like I have here today and freezing cold, or you've got a storm rolling through. It does not matter. They can react. This is triggering a core response in a bass. So a bass, if you are reliant on a bass to want to eat, i.e. you're using a slow moving lure on the bottom and it looks good, be that, you know, dragging a big swim bait or a worm or a jig, you are reliant for the bass to be in the mood to want to bite that thing and to look at it and decide that it looks like a meal and then to eat it. When you speed crank past a fish, when you burn by them, there's a cat and mouse reaction that happens in that fish, and they lash out. They want to attack, they want to eat, and they will chase. Now, if the conditions are truly terrible, post-frontal, the fish are miserable, you know, high pressure, sometimes it's hard to get that reaction. But the vast majority of time, they are hardwired to chase, and they will come full speed after that object that just flew past them. And the idea here with speed cranking is we burn, 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 pause, burn, 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 pause, burn, pause. They chase, and when we pause and that bait stops in front of them, they smash it. That's how we're getting giant fish to react. Fish that are too smart to want to eat our lure are reacting and eating our lure without a care in the world, and it's incredible how well it works. With that, let's switch over. Let's jump up. Let's run through the retrieves, and then let's sit back down, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about the how, the why, and then we'll talk through these categories of baits and how to use them to your advantage from out deep to right up shallow as well. Now, when it comes to speed cranking, the retrieve really is all about speed. We're going to throw this thing out there. We want to get it down as quickly as possible, and then we're going to work on our cadence. So in the beginning, it's just burning to get it down. I'm using a 7-to-1 reel for this example. We also do this a lot with an 8-to-1 reel. Let's get the bait out there. Now, to start, it's all about getting it down to depth. And again, we don't have to actually hit bottom, but you at least want to be close. In this example, I am going to make contact with the bottom, but first thing is to get it down there. You see how fast that handle's going? I am speed cranking. Now I just hit bottom. I'm gonna give it a little pause. Burn, 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 pause. Burn, 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 pause. Burn, pause. Burn, 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 pause. It really is that fast. I mean, we are talking about burning these baits in the freezing cold. It is a pure reaction strike from these fish. This is not complicated. I could have told you this, but it's so much more effective for you to see how fast we're actually talking about going here. It is 24 degrees this morning. My hands are frozen. My line is freezing up. I made a couple casts to get the line wet 5 minutes ago, and my gear froze up, but that sun's getting just high enough that it's not so bad in the sunlight now. Now, we can slow this down a little bit. Let's go down to like a medium fast, okay? Especially if you're making contact with the bottom, because once you're hitting the bottom, if it's really rocky, you can only go so fast without snagging. So we will slow down and sort of pick it through the cover, letting it bounce and deflect and move. But again, do not be concerned with making contact with the bottom. If you are making contact, if that's the depth the fish are at and you can make contact, that is great. You can get a lot of bites by bouncing and deflecting off of cover. But if that's not the case, if you are not making any contact with bottom and we're just doing the stop and go mid column, that creates enough of those reactive moments, those starts and stops, those pauses, where those fish will lash out and attack as if it were deflecting off of the bottom. So don't get caught up with that. Again, speed is number one. Everything else is second. Get that crankbait down there, and you can learn a lot on your way down. There are days where I discover that the vast majority of my bites come as I'm burning to the bottom. Those are the days where that 8-to-1 reel and as fast as you can possibly turn the handle is so critical. On the days where almost all your bites come when you've burned it down and you're working through your pauses and they eat it on the pause, that tells you can slow it down a little bit, go to that 7-to-1 reel, don't go quite as crazy, and you'll get more bites that way. All right, let's sit down, let's talk through some of these baits. Now that you've got a feel for how fast we're talking about fishing these baits, we're talking about a true reaction strike, a true cat and mouse game with these fish. You can kind of get a picture in your head of what's going on. Because it's one thing for me to say, hey, grab a 7-to-1 or an 8-to-1 and burn it. It's a whole different thing to see that it's completely frozen out here this morning. That's all ice up there on the shoreline. And we're turning that handle as fast as we can go. And those fish will absolutely chase that thing. Now, if you burned it all the way to the boat, you would never even know they were back there. Well, I guess with some forward-facing sonars, you would now. But when we developed this in our own fishing, we had nothing but 2D sonar. We had no clues what was going on. We figured this out. We figured it out making bottom contact, and we put in the years and the time, and we learned how to do this for suspended bass before there was any of these technologies to help you locate those fish. We were studying thermoclines and fishing just above the thermocline and various reservoirs in completely open water, completely blind, to catch giant fish without a clue where they were out there, just fan casting. It was really an amazing time in our personal fishing. Now, going back to the baits and all of this, where are you going to do this? First off, okay, you can do it with a shallow bait, right up shallow, and you can go all the way out deep. With that in mind, here's the main deal. If I have a choice, because your lake might be a little different than mine, and Tim and I travel nonstop, so we see all sorts of different conditions. If I have a choice, I will do this around rock in the wintertime. Bass just get attracted to rock in the winter, deep rock. So main lake points, underwater road beds, island tops out in the lake, or humps out in the lake that don't make it to the surface. If any of those have rock on them, fish just seem to hold around that rock in the wintertime. We know that from jig fishing, right? When that jig starts getting crunchy, banging through those rocks, you just can feel it's coming. Dong, there they are. Fish are around that rock. So that's where I like to go if it is an option. Main reason is because it's easy. So I like main lake points and pinch points on a lake. If I'm going to a lake I've never seen before, I'll look at the map. And if I can see where two arms come together, that main point there, or if I see, it's wandering back up an arm of a lake and there's an area in there where it's really wide and then it squeezes and then it gets wide again, that pinch point, both of those points can be so key. So those main areas are where I'm going to go try to do this first if I don't already know my lake. If they're rocky, all the better. The reason why I like that rock is, one, there's fish there. Two, I can deflect a lot. So if I'm grinding that bait down and I make bottom contact and I really hit a rock, then I can pause and it'll sort of dart off of that rock. And that can trigger a reaction strike. And that's a very traditional reaction strike with a crankbait. And you can burn it through those rocks, and it'll be grinding, and then you kill it and it cuts out again. Boom, that fish will eat that thing. So it really helps with your retrieve. Now, if your fishery doesn't have a lot of that rock, you're still looking for similar places. You're looking for places where fish are going to want to position, but then you create the reaction strike yourself. So if I'm making bottom contact, but there's no rock, I'm digging along the bottom, I just burn, pause. And when I pause, you guys might have noticed, well, when I'm showing you, it's a little tougher, but I like to throw it just a little bit of slack. That helps the bait come to a true stop. Now, I generally throw on fluorocarbon lines, straight fluorocarbon, generally 12 pounds. That fluorocarbon itself has some stretch, so it's not a true hard stop. If I find that all of my bites are coming right on the pause, I'll actually switch over to braid to a 12-pound leader. But the advantage of braid is there is less give, and when I stop, the bait stops. When I go, the bait goes. So it's much harsher start and stop. Much harsher. Whereas on fluoro, there's going to be a little bit of drag in those reactions. Most of the time it doesn't matter. The fluoro is really easy to fish with for this technique. But if I notice again that all the bites are coming on those hard pauses, then they are reacting very aggressively that day, and going to braid will take it to the next level. So I'm creating on that softer mush bottom, you know, a mud bottom, something like that. I'm creating the pauses myself. So even though there is nothing to deflect off of, by adding those quick starts and stops, I'm creating the motion that will cause the fish to react. They're already chasing because of speed. Color is critical for this as well. In deeper water, we're spending a lot of time in those ghostier colors, a lot of time. And it's because we don't want them to get a good look at it. We want them to feel it go by, right? They sense vibration. They feel it. They might get a glimpse of it, but it's going so fast that they tear after that thing. If it's a bright, bold color and they can see it clearly, especially in clear water, sometimes their question has been answered and they don't need to chase. So those ghostier colors will really help us dial that in and get them to come after it. Now, once we've got them coming after it, it's all about that game that we're playing. That's how we get them to lash out and to feed. So it does not matter whether you've got cover or structure to deflect off of, or whether you're creating it yourself. It also, as I mentioned before, does not matter if you are making bottom contact. Traditional crankbaiting, you want to get down there and be grinding along to try and get a reaction. But because we're going so fast and we're adding the pauses, we can create that ourselves in the middle of the water column. Tim and I, again, did this for years before we had the help of our electronics. Now that there are modern electronics to tell you that the fish are 12 feet down out over 90 feet of water, that is a big advantage. We used to do all of that blind. When I would go to a new lake, I would pull up to a main lake point. My first couple casts would be up on the point. My next couple would be further out into the middle of nowhere. And I cannot tell you how many times I've caught my big fish of the day on a tactical DD 75, 10 to 15 feet down in 50 to 100 feet of water on a lake I've never been to. It is very, very common. So don't be afraid of making bottom contact. Now, the colder the water gets, the closer you want to be to the fish. The warmer the water, when that water's in the 50s, man, in clear water, they'll come 15, 20, 25 feet to get that bait. But when that water gets really cold, you need to get close to them. So you don't necessarily have to make bottom contact, but you want to be within about 2 or 3 feet of those fish. Even if that's over their head and you pause over the top of them, it's close enough for them to jump up and come after it. If you're 10 feet over their head, they'll just let it go. So colder the water, narrower the strike zone. Warmer the water, the farther they're willing to go to get to the bait. All right, I think that's enough of that. You guys understand the concept. You understand how we're doing this, the mindset behind getting those fish to react, the fact that you can use this to trigger a giant bass that has been educated, a bass that is too smart to fall for a bait, but still has a core instinct that will cause it to react to a bait when done right. Let's talk through the baits themselves. We'll start with the deep divers, then we're going to talk about some finesse baits that we almost never talk about, and then we'll talk about the shallow end of this thing too. Again, everything here is geared towards cold water cranking, winter cranking, but some of this has carryover all year. We're going to use the Tactical DD as our baseline. This is the bait that Tim and I designed with River to Sea specifically for this technique. And then we'll go up in size from there, and then we'll go down in size from there, okay? We'll call this the baseline. The Tactical DD, we built this with a very specific vibration, a very specific sound, and we were looking for the exact right amount of deflection out of the bill. There were some amazing baits on the market. Some still exist today, some were discontinued, but we saw little things in each one that we felt like we could improve. We were catching giant fish, but we were breaking baits or snagging too much, or various problems, and we were able to refine it and build a bait that we felt could do all of those things really well. That's not new. You guys know all about this bait. It's not by mistake that it comes in a lot of very ghosty colors. I just talked about why that is. A bait like that, or a true shad, or a mirrored minnow, ghost minnow. So many great options that you can use in that clearer water. But again, you've also got, bright, bold options. You've got natural options. We got Northern Special, which just absolutely crushes around smallmouth. It's also incredible around largemouth in stained water. That guy speaks for himself. When you've got that clear water and they're eating craws, that is the one. You got your chartreuse blues. We built a few colors to help in summertime too, because we discovered that that was a thing after the fact. We did not build our crankbait for summer fishing whatsoever. The fact that it works and it catches big ones is an awesome accident. So we came back later with some colors that would help more with those summer months as well. But again, it's all about those ghostier colors in the winter. The big thing here, we're getting, I'm gonna call the sweet spot here, bass that are in 13 to 17 feet of water. Okay, the biggest thing with speed cranking is you've got to get near the fish when the water is really cold. So 13 to 17 foot. Now, if I go down to really light line, I can get more than 19 foot out of this bait. I'm typically throwing it on 8-pound when I do that. I already told you though, my preferred is 12-pound. 12-pound is thin enough that I can get all the depth I need on a long cast. It's strong enough that when I hook an absolute giant, I still stand a chance in that fight. So if I need to get deeper, I go lighter or I go to a different bait. I do that a lot, but that 13 to 17 is the sweet spot for the Tactical DD where I can get those fish to react. To go deeper than that, for Megabass, we've got the Deep 6. Okay, the Deep 6 comfortably runs about 1.5 feet deeper. Forget what all the packages say. I'm just telling you, real world, I've got them all on 12-pound. The Deep 6 is going to give me about another 1.5 feet over a Tactical DD. That's the advantage there. I can get just a little bit deeper. Now, it's also a little bit larger, and it's actually a little bit tighter actioned as well. This bait was never designed for cold water speed cranking. That was not its intention. It was designed for grass fishing. The fact that it does this incredibly well, again, is awesome. It's a happy accident, and it is a fish catching machine. Now, we can actually go one up from that, and I completely forgot to grab it this morning. Duo Realis, they have the G87. That bait will go even deeper. That bait will let us get down there around that 20-foot mark comfortably. Beyond that, we don't really do it. Once the fish get out deeper than that, You know, you can throw a 10XD. There's different baits that you can throw, and there are days where it will absolutely work, even in the dead cold. But the reason it's working is not because the baits are right. It's simply because the fish have not seen a bait of that size going that speed at that time of year. So sometimes it will work. But those baits are super wide action, wide wobbled, super loud. It's not right for the technique. So most of the time they won't respond to it like they should. I haven't ran into the perfect bait yet for going super deep in the winter. So a lot of times in our videos, you'll notice like Tim and I will catch some tactical DD fish or some speed crank fish out deep, and then all of a sudden we're doing other things. That's because as that sun gets up high, those fish will suck down, they move out, and they go out of reach of that technique. So we reach for an A-rig or a jig or something else. Now, back to our baseline, let's go the other direction, okay? From there, the next one is also from Megabass, and that is the Deep X 300. The Deep X 300 is a sweet bait. This one, 12 to 14 foot is the sweet spot. And of course, you could run it a little shallower too. So let's actually modify that. Let's say like 11 to 14 foot, okay? That's the sweet spot for that bait. A little bit smaller hooks, smaller body, but I'll tell you what, it gets giant bites. Between these two baits, you would think size would matter. The Deep X, or I'm sorry, the Deep 6 would catch bigger fish than the Deep X 300. That has not been my experience. I catch way more of the big ones. We catch a lot of fish on both, but I catch more of the really, really big ones on the 300 than I do on the Deep 6. It's not always just a size-driven thing. Those fish are willing to hunt the right profiles and the right vibration. This is a very special, very overlooked bait. It works so well as a 1-2 punch with the tactical DD. Here we are getting deeper and we deflect better off of cover. Here we're running a little bit shallower and a little bit more subtle. And that can be all the difference. I always have these baits in my boat this time of year, and they're side by side in my boat because I don't know which one I'm going to reach for on a given day. And then to go shallower than that, typically you're going to see us go to the rock crawler. Now the rock crawler is sort of its own animal, much wider wobbling, but the rock crawler does an incredible job of deflecting off of cover. And so often when those fish are in that, like, I don't know, 6 to 10, 6 to 11, something like that, we're really trying to just grind through the rocks. Again, I love fishing that rocky stuff if I have a choice, and the rock crawler is amazing for doing that. Now, because we're specifically targeting them on rock, really grinding that thing, I'll often go to a lot of those craw colors as well. So that's the core of speed cranking. That is 90+% of what we do. But that said, there is a time and a place for getting really subtle, and of course there's a time and a place for getting really, really shallow as well. So for subtle baits, let's talk about the Rapala Shad Rap. This is the 7, this is the 5. The Shad Rap is one of those original cold water baits. Traditional cold water baits tend to be longer bodied and very narrow side to side. That Shad Rap is a perfect example of that. Through the years, the biggest issue with Shad Raps is that they're so light, they're hard for people to cast. So a lot of people throw them on a spinning rod. Bait Finesse and changes in bait casting reels in general have made huge advancements in that. But burning a Shad Rap, now, you cannot go quite as fast with the Shad Rap as you can with the true speed crank. You do have to slow it down a little bit, but the Shad Rap is just such a proven bait, such a special bait in that really cold water when those fish are up fairly shallow. Then one more for you in that really subtle game. If you know where your fish are, you know, and they're in less than 10 or 12 foot of water and you just can't seem to get them for whatever reason, sometimes, you know, bluebird conditions, post front, grumpy fish from Megabass, This is called the Eye by Eye shad. IXI, Eye by Eye. That is a special bait. I have had a bunch of friends, unrelated to one another, turn us on to this bait. Just one after another. They're like, hey, have you thrown that? Hey, have you thrown that? Hey, what about this situation? What about that? You know, it's just one of those baits that guys whisper about. Is a very special bait when those fish are really, really shut down. Again, you can throw it on spinning, you can throw it on bait finesse, or you can throw it on really light bait casters without actually diving into bait finesse. Now, on the shallow end of the game, in a lot of lakes, there are some fish that stay shallow through the winter. Not all lakes, but a lot of lakes. A month from now, it's a huge deal. So either way, you should start getting prepared for when fish start pushing shallow again. But you can do this exact same thing. Burn, 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 pause, burn, pause, burn, burn, pause. With square bills and shallow crankbaits that we do with deep divers. And we don't talk about it a lot. You see us do it a lot in the spring, but we don't necessarily label it speed cranking. It's just very aggressive shallow fishing. But in the cold, cold water, I have done damage. We're sitting on Chickamauga today. We're on the Tennessee River. I have done damage here in January, in a snowstorm, flakes pouring down on the boat, throwing this guy right here. That Aught's Slim. So this is from Rapala. Aught Defoe designed that bait. This is the Slim. It was the first bait in their OG series. I have done work with this thing, this color too, while it is snowing. If the bass are in shallower water, on the Tennessee River, they love to stay shallow. I don't know what their deal is, but they do. A flat-sided shallow running bait. I'm not going to say a square bill because they're not actually square bills, but a flat-sided shallow bait has a very unique vibration that fish will react to in really cold water, and you can get them. And I'm talking from 2 to 6 foot of water, realistically, is where we're doing this. Deflecting off cover, getting those fish to react. That color, because on the day that I have a particular day in mind where it was dumping snow and the water was filthy muddy, and this was my color, and they were just crashing that thing. But you can take a shallow bait and use that same burn, 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 pause, burn, pause, burn, burn, pause, burn, 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 pause. By the way, we know that you guys want a burn, burn, pause t-shirt. If you guys have missed it, we have launched a new apparel store. It's store.tacticalbassin.com. We're finally, after all these years, selling apparel ourselves, merch, apparel, you know, there's stickers. It took us 14 years to do a sticker. We're not necessarily the sharpest tool in the shed, but we get there eventually. You can also just go to tacticalbassin.com, hit the menu, click merch. That'll get you there too, if you guys want to see all that stuff. But we know people have been asking for a burn, 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 pause shirt for years. We're going to do it for you. It's not there yet. There's a bunch of awesome stuff there right now. That one's not there yet, but it is definitely coming. But back on track. Burn, 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 pause made me think about it. But you can take these baits and just burn them through the shallows and pause, burn, 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 pause, burn, pause, burn, 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 pause. And those fish will unload on it. As a 1-2 punch, we've got that guy, and then we've got the tiny. It's little brother, same bait, just smaller. And then I've got one more for you. From Spro, we've got the Little John. The Little John is one of those baits that Tim and I have done so much damage on for so many years. I mean, we were crushing them on this before this ever came to market. But this is such an amazing cold water bait, amazing. But so is that Little John. We do so much damage on this bait every year in late winter going into spring. It's just remarkable. And it is that same exact thing. Burn, 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 pause, burn, pause, burn, 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 pause. And I'm generally trying to keep those baits just above bottom. If you're making contact with rock and stuff, that's totally fine. But a lot of time in the shallows, there'll be a lot of junk up there. There might be, you know, leaves that came down back in the fall, muck up there, branches. So if you're digging, a lot of times you're just getting hung up in all that muck. So I like to take my baits and use the one that will stay just above that stuff. And then again, I'm using the burn, 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 pause to create that reaction that I would normally get by getting down there and deflecting off of things. As far as gear goes, you know, it's not a surprise, the 906, that G Loomis IMX Pro 906, the main rod that we use for all of our bigger speed cranks. 7-to-1 or 8-to-1 reel. I told you 12-pound fluoro is our main gig. I do upgrade the hooks on our Tactical DD. The stock hooks are money. I've caught a lot of giant fish on them, but when I wear them out, I do upgrade to this particular owner hook. We'll link that in the video description as well. Now, for the guy who doesn't want to spend like that, you know, we've got a Corrado 150 MGL on there. That's because that reel can cast a country mile. Those MGL spools can throw so far, and depth is key with this. You know, when I'm telling you how deep a bait will go, that is dependent on you being able to cast it far. I'm able to cast really far with my gear, and that's how I maximize my depth. The farther out it is, the deeper you can get it before it starts coming back up at the boat. So that gear is critical, but not everybody can afford it. I completely understand that. For somebody that wants just like a do-all, this is from St. Croix. This is the Black Bass series. It's a newer series from them. I've got their GF reel on it, 12-pound fluoro, but this is the 7.4 medium heavy moderate. Now this is a glass rod, that's why the blank is so thick. It's a glass rod, but the medium heavy moderate has a very unique action where it can throw these bigger speed cranks, but it can also throw your shallower baits as well. So if a guy is on a budget and you're looking for a really good combo that really can throw this stuff and can throw all of it, glass will really help you with that because it's more forgiving, and that will help you throw everything without needing a bunch of different combos. So I throw my speed cranks on that IMX Pro, throw the shallow stuff on a Mega Bass. This is in the Levante line. This is the flat side special. Flat side crankbait, flat side special. But seriously, all of my square bills, all of my flat sides, all that stuff is all thrown on the flat side special. And I'll bet I own 30 different rods for this style of fishing, and as a result have been able to spend a lot of time dialing it in and trying to find the perfect rod, the perfect reel, the perfect line. 12-pound again seems to be the perfect line for all of this stuff. I only go shallower if I'm in really nasty cover where my line's just getting chewed on. You know, it's just getting around dock pilings or around laydowns, or if it's really rocky and I'm just grinding through all that stuff and it's just tearing my gear up all the time, I'll go heavier. I go lighter if I need to get deeper, but 12-pound is always going to be that starting point. I'll link all this stuff in the video description. The baits, I'll give you favorite colors for every one of them because color is so critical this time of year. You want those fish, particularly with the deep diving baits, you want those fish to feel the bait go by, but you don't want them to get a good look at it. And then when they run up on it and it pauses, then you want it to look perfect, so that they smash that thing and just choke it. That's the idea behind it. With my shallow baits, a lot more that I'll throw some shad patterns, but I spend a lot of time throwing craw stuff when I go shallower. It's just mix and match, right? A little bit of this, a little bit of that, seeing what those fish are reacting to. But I'll give you my favorites for every one of those categories. I'll link the combos, all that for you. Hopefully this was helpful. We reference speed cranking all the time. We do it in videos all the time, but we don't always sit down and talk through the specifics of all the baits as a system or show you those retrieves, because I think the visual of seeing that we're actually going that fast really hits harder than just hearing us say it. It really is that fast regardless of water temperature, and it will work on your fish in your lake. We know that because we have traveled all over the country doing it, from catching double digits in the west, catching giant fish in the south. The very first day that I ever speed cranked on the Great Lakes was actually in the summertime, but we had horrible wind blowing offshore. It blew all the warm water out of a bay and high 30s water upwelled up onto this reef that we were on. Everything says that bite should be so shut down it's not even funny, right? These fish just got an absolute shock. But Great Lakes fish are insane. they tend to not care about cold. They're crazy. But that cold water upwelled in there, and on my very first day ever in the Great Lakes, we cranked a high 25-pound bag of smallmouth, speed cranking in freezing cold water in the middle of summer. This works everywhere, from north to south, east to west. Giant fish will respond to a speed crank. I don't care which fishery is your specific home lake, it can and will work for you there if you put in the effort and it catches the big ones. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.